Hi guys, so I want to show you this video from Unlocked, a YouTuber called Unlocked, a pro-Brexit YouTuber. And here the interview, June Mummery, who is a member of the Brexit party, she was very supportive of Brexit, of course, and she represents part of the fishing industry. She's, of course, very angry with the situation, of course, blaming Boris Johnson, blaming the EU. And you're going to hear her introduce a fisherman who has been in the industry for 40 years. He supported Brexit and he still seems to support Brexit. So let's hear what they had to say.
I'm going to leave the two meaty, juicy bits to Paul to explain, because, you know, Paul is a fisherman of 40 years. He understands the markets, he understands quota, and he really does understand this dreadful deal that Boris has got for coastal communities in the UK. So actually, Paul, I think I'm going to hand that straight over to you, that question, if you can let our great British public know exactly what's going on. No frills, no trickles. Let's just say it as it is, Paul.
Well, the situation why a lot of truck drivers and fishing companies and processors are demonstrating in London is because they've bought catches off trawlers, Peterhead, Aberdeen, Scotland. They've processed that catch. They've loaded it ready to ongoing, like they've done for years and years and years, to the continent. When they get to the ferry terminal, there's all sorts of paperwork that ain't filled in right, that they won't accept this, they won't accept that, and that fish lay rotten in them trucks because, quite honestly, the French don't want it to go.
So it's the French's fault. So this is look, I've heard all sorts of excuses, but now it's the French. It's because the French don't want the fish to get across the border. That's it. That's his excuse. It's nothing to do with Brexit. Like, this guy has been working in the industry for 40 years. He voted for Brexit, as far as I can tell, because he's been interviewed by Brexiteers and they haven't, you know, he hasn't criticized Brexit yet. He voted for Brexit. And what did he expect to achieve from this? What did he expect was going to come from all of this? You had freedom of movement, in a sense, where you had frictionless trade, and you voted to end that. Now, of course, he's going to blame Boris Johnson's trade deal, but that's irrelevant. The UK is now a third country. The European Union has said on numerous occasions, when you become a third country, there's going to be massive changes. I've talked about it before on this channel. There's going to be changes in January, and people were criticizing me, saying Project Fear in the comment section, continually saying stop running down the country.
They're not playing the game. We gave everything up to get a deal for free trade, no messing around, but there's been more messing around.
My God, he doesn't understand. Like, I understand there are some, like, the politicians understand what the mess is, but this guy who's a fisherman doesn't understand the mess. He's convinced that it's the French that are stopping the fish from getting across the border. It's the French people's fault. So there are restaurants or businesses in France who've placed orders for British fish, and it's the port that doesn't want the fish to cross the border. Now, can this guy wrap his head around what changed? What changed on the 1st of January? Has he not been following this over the last 4 years? I'm not an expert on fishing, but I understand that the UK is a third country, and in order to export into the EU from a third country, you need to do all this paperwork. Now, surely he would have understood that. We all knew that there was going to be extra paperwork, but surely if you're in the industry and you're selling something as delicate as fish, you would say, look, if there's going to be paperwork, I'm not going to vote for that.
They are sick and tired of losing their income and seeing all the hard work thrown away. It's disgusting. The government need to grow a set of balls and face up, and they should have done this. They should have done this.
Boris Johnson needs to grow a set of balls. I'm sorry, balls don't come into this. no matter how much you wanted to. I'm sorry, but this doesn't come down to being tough. This actually comes down to the opposite. It would be better for Boris Johnson not to grow anymore, but to go to the EU begging for changes. But of course, that's not going to happen, because the EU said, look, we told you about this. We told you that if you become a third country, you're going to have these restrictions. The EU have been talking about this for a long time, but it was dismissed by Brexiteers. It was dismissed by The Telegraph. It was dismissed by Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson as Project Fear. Look at the EU as just, playing the fishing industry as a bargaining chip. They don't really mean that. It's all just a con. It's all just to take some of our fish.
This months ago, and they should have had trial runs with the French. What's going to happen? But no, they've done nothing.
Actually, they did some trial runs, but they failed. And I actually highlighted this on the channel. And some of the comments in the comments section were, it's the French's fault, or it's Project Fear, or it's just an attempt to undermine Brexit. We've left, get over it.
I expect the brunt to be borne by processors. But that put aside, most people won't understand what that deal is. Well,
actually, the deal is irrelevant. Now he's going to start talking about the deal, but the deal is irrelevant because the deal doesn't affect what's happening at the port. That's because the UK is a third country. You voted for that. This guy on the screen, he voted for the UK to become a third country. He voted for non-tariff barriers. Now, I try to be generous here. I try to be kind to people because some people may not know that. A lot of people don't know that, don't know what these tariffs are, these non-tariff barriers are. But if your industry is dependent on selling fish, raw fish, fresh fish into the EU, and it needs to be delivered as quickly as possible, what in all God's name, in all that's good, would convince you that, yes, we need to put up a barrier?
The whole deal, in essence, is the fact that they've assessed that Europe catches 146 million pounds worth of fish in our waters, which represent 60% of their landings. We, over 5 years, are going to take 25% back of that 60%.
Okay, but even if you got 100%, where the hell are you going to sell it? The problem is selling it. The problem is not catching it, because you've caught it. It's stuck at the port. If you want to catch not 1 ton to be stuck at the port. You want to catch 10 tons to be stuck at the port. These people are trying to change or move the goalposts. They understand that Brexit... Now, I don't know if this guy understands, because he seems incapable of understanding, because he voted for it and he's still defending it. I'm not an expert on the fishing industry. I know very little about it, but I seem to understand more than this guy does, and he's been in it for 40 bloody years. The UK is a third country. Now you have to fill out this paperwork. Now, you can blame the French, you can ask for Boris Johnson to grow something, but that's not going to change the reality. I understand that somebody sold you a unicorn and said, look, here's this, shiny new unicorn, but it's a unicorn. It doesn't exist. You were conned. Now, I think the best approach when you're conned is to take a step back and understand. First, is you have to accept I was conned. I was conned by the Brexiteers. I was conned by Boris Johnson. I was conned by Nigel Farage. The second step is to stop listening to these people. Unfortunately, this fisherman is continuing to listen to the Brexit Party, the people who conned him, the people who said, you'll be able to do everything. Now, I've been thinking about this over the last number of days, and I've been trying to understand, what was the motivation here? Surely this guy who's been in the industry for 40 years, what convinced him to vote against his own interests? And I'm trying not to be mean, honestly, but it always comes back to one thing. And that one thing is greed. I can't get away from it, because if you look at the EU, the European Union try to have some policies that are good, some policies that are not good. But generally, when it comes to fishing, they're trying to protect the fishing industry by asking the fishing industry not to overfish, not to destroy the ecosystem. Now, in some cases, they give them financial support to do so. In other cases, no. But we have seen what happens when we allow fishermen just to do whatever the hell they want. There are parts here of the Adriatic in Italy that are dead zones. There are parts, and I was speaking to somebody in Scandinavia who was telling me the same thing. There are parts of Scandinavia that are dead zones. There are no fish. There were fish, but the fishermen didn't care. They just wanted more and more fish to sell to make as much profit as possible in a short amount of time, and they destroyed their own industry. The European Union stepped in and said, look, we can't continue this way. We're going to limit the amount of fish you can catch, and this will protect you in the long term. But imagine you as a fisherman are limited. The EU is saying, look, you shouldn't be fishing too much. You need to limit the amount of fish you catch. And you're surviving, or you're not doing very well. I don't know. But somebody like Nigel Farage comes along and says, look, if we leave the EU, you can fish as much as you want. Now, a reasonable person would say, yes, but if I fish as much as I want, or the other guy fishes as much as he wants, we won't have an industry in 10 years' time or 20 years' time. It'll be gone. But if you're greedy and you just want to fish as much as you can and make as much profit as you can and say, look, to hell with the future, Brexiteers don't really have a good track record of looking after their next generation, ending freedom of movement, for example, for younger people. So if somebody is greedy and just wants to catch as much fish as possible and sell it as quickly as possible and doesn't actually think about the steps in between, and is just listening to somebody like Nigel Farage who's saying, yeah, I'm going to fix all your problems, I'm going to fix all your problems, I'm going to destroy the EU, we're going to become an independent state, we're going to sell our fish all over the world, they're going to sell it into the EU because they need us more than they need us more than we need them. And it's victory, it's sunlit uplands, it's perfect, you can do whatever the hell you want on the sea, nobody's going to tell you what to do. That's very enticing. But a rational person would say, wait a minute, Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, people who have a track record of lying, are telling me I can have a unicorn. Now, I have worked in this industry for 40 years. Am I going to look at the reality, or am I going to listen to Nigel Farage? Now, I hope I'm wrong here, but this is the impression I get, that these people were greedy. And I'm not saying all fishermen are like that, not one way, not at all. But the vast majority of fishermen voted for Brexit. Why did they do that? Is it ignorance? Is it desperation? Or is it greed? Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?